Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. Today I'm back again with another Survivor themed video. Spoiler warning, this will talk about the results of Survivor seasons. I'm going to be ranking every runner-up in from every season of Survivor. I'm going to have 5 tiers. There's going to be a white, purple, blue, green, and gold tier. Um, White means that they were basically goats and had no shot of winning. Purple means that they were considered to have like very little of shot of winning no matter who they faced in the final. And blue was like they had a shot, like mixed chance, and we're not exactly sure. But like if the winner wasn't in the final tribal, they had like I don't know about a 50-50 shot, but like a decent chance. Green was we were pretty sure that if they were in the final tribal, they would have won. Like there was a pretty good chance, like probably 2/3 chance they would have won. And then gold tier is like if they were in the final tribal, we know for certain they would have won. Some of these I'll talk about in chunks because I don't necessarily need to talk about every single person. Um, but let me talk about Philip, Clay, Twyla, and Lillian or Lil from let me talk about those four first, kind of as a chunk. We knew for certain, like, no matter who they faced in the final tribal, they would have lost because people just perceived them as a goat and really did not like them. And people thought that they really had no chance of winning no matter who they faced because they were just so dislikable. Next, we have Susie, who a similar thing, but she actually did get 3 votes at final tribal, so I put her a bit higher here. She was 1 vote. She was 1 vote away from winning. I don't remember if it was 5-4 or 4-3, but she was like 1 vote away from being a Survivor winner, which is crazy. That she was that close and she was as bad of a Survivor as she was. Courtney, I put just higher here because I feel like people liked her more, even though she did not have a very good shot. Like, let's sub in Denise for Todd in that final 3. I think Amanda probably wins, but um, you know, seeing as Courtney got second place and did actually get a final vote, she may have had a better shot because she was able to articulate herself well, even though she didn't get many votes or anything. Next, Dreams, Missy, Maddie, Hannah. Honestly, this whole tier, I would say, like Dreams and Missy were pretty much disliked, and people thought that they had some glean of like gameplay in them, but they weren't. They just weren't likable enough to really actually win a season of Survivor. Matt, season 6, he was decently likable, but people just, if he faced off against Rob, people were for sure voting for Rob, and maybe Matt was getting a couple of votes, and he just didn't really have a shot. His best shot probably would have been if he could. Butch went out at 4. If he could have somehow gotten to the final 2 of Butch, he probably, I guess, probably he wins Amazon if it's him and Butch in the final, but it's hard to know because Butch was a likable dude, so people might have gone that way too. Hannah in season 33, there's no way she's beating either David or Adam, but I think what she did do is she played a good social game, and so people really liked her, even though she didn't do anything strategically or in challenges. Jervis, same sort of thing. Like he was considered really likable, but people didn't really think he had a shot of winning. Same with Katie, honestly, too, and Kim. I would put them all in the same space that like people liked them a lot, but they just thought, this other person just played better. Um, Nalia and Danielle, people who were considered kingmakers, which is that like they were going to determine who won the season, but they themselves didn't really have much of a shot. So Nalia picked Vesepia over Kathy, whereas Danielle picked Aris over Terry. But people didn't really think that they had much of a shot because they had kind of just floated with the majority, but never made any decisions or anything, and kind of just were there just because the rest of the alliance was voted out. So I have them down here. And they both had some sort of like association with them of like they were kind of brats and kind of spoiled in real life, so people held that against them in the game. But what they did have is that they were always part of the majority and they were able to kind of get to the end just based on that. Next I have Dawn, who probably is pretty low here, and I actually considered moving her up a bit, but I think if Eddie makes the final 3 instead of Cochran, he actually may have had an okay shot at winning because he had a few, I think, for sure votes in like, um, I think it was like, I think if he would have gotten there, he would have had Corinne, Reynolds, and Malcolm. So that was a pretty good inroads for him. And so for me, like Dawn's status as the winner would have been shaky if it would have been her, Sherry, and Eddie. Because I think Eddie could have ridden the momentum of being like the underdog and could have said like, what did Dawn really do? She really just like rode Cochran's coattails and then voted him out at the end, whereas I like had to continuously fight on my own throughout the game. Lisa and Christina, I'm actually gonna put in similar categories here, and they actually played back-to-back seasons. They uh they rode the majority alliance. I think the reason I put Sabrina higher is because I think she was more likable than Lisa. Not that Lisa was dislikable, but it seemed like people kind of got annoyed with Lisa sometimes, whereas I don't think that happened with Sabrina. And so for that reason, I put her higher. But they played very similar games. Like we're always kind of riding shotgun with the big decision maker of the season. But like in Philippines, it seemed like Skupin was really the big decision maker, and Lisa was kind of his right hand man or woman. And Sabrina did that for Kim, but neither like ever took the lead. It seemed like. So for that reason, if Malcolm subs in for Denise, he wins that season. But if you sub in um, Christina for Kim, Sabrina probably wins that season, but it's just hard to know because her and Chelsea really played the exact same game, so it was like 50-50 shot. Natalie was season 40. If you put Sarah into the mix instead of Tony, I think Natalie has like a 50-50 shot because um, she did play a pretty impressive game with the time that she had on the island. Wu at 21, if he picks Tony over himself, or excuse me, if he picks Cass over Tony, people have said that he wins that season. But also, Wu had a really bad final tribal, whereas I feel like Cass is really well spoken. And Cass could have finagled some magic where she has a great final tribal and wins over some votes, and Wu still ends up losing. But people have said that he had a pretty solid to guaranteed shot if he doesn't take Tony. Um, Spencer at 20, I think if you sub out Jeremy for Kelly, um, I think it's hard to debate. It's hard to know, but I think that Spencer actually would win that season. It's really hard. Like I'd say it's 50-50 because it just come down to like what do people respect more? Kelly constantly playing from the bottom or Spencer playing from the dominant alliance, and it's just hard to know. Because although Kelly did hang in there, she didn't have really many friends on the jury except for like Abby and um, Sierra. So I don't know how many votes she actually would have gotten. Next, I have Amanda, who I'm actually gonna kind of loop in with Stephanie here. They play very similar games. I think that like they again rode the majority alliance, were considered a somewhat decision maker at times, but not always. But they also, for some reason, garnered some level of like minor dislike and resentment from their juries as well, just for their attitudes, I feel like. So they were like considered solid runners up, but just missing some sort of like jury management aspect to their games. Carolyn, you know, solid socially, solid with the idol play, but she just went up against the force of nature. But a lot of people think in any other season she would have been uh, a pretty solid winner choice. Kelly in season one, probably the hardest person to rank just because season one is such a different animal from the rest of the series as a whole. But Kelly played as good as she could with the cards she was dealt. I think she won 4 individual immunities, which is still the record to today of record for most individual immunities by a woman won in a season. And I think it was Greg who said in Final Tribal, I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 10. Whoever is closer gets my vote. And Rich picked the right number and Kelly didn't. So, like, let's say Kelly picks the right number. She wins Survivor. But that's also subject to scrutiny, debate, like whether how truthful you think that whole line of logic was from Greg. So it's hard to know. Dean in season 15, I think he wins if you sub out Tommy for Lauren, but people have debated that too. But I think between all the advantages he had a really solid chance of winning. Russell, season 19. I think if he just doesn't treat the jury terribly, he wins the season pretty easily. But based on his social game being relatively flawed, but also that's contested too because I've heard Russell on his podcast and like his YouTube channel say like, I've I was friends with a good amount of the jury and it was just like a couple of bad apples who swayed the rest of them to vote against me. So it's hard to know and it's like up for debate, but um a lot of people think that like he had a pretty good shot at winning if he would have just handled a couple of select jury members better. Gavin, if it's any, it's hard to debate because a lot of people think he should have just won straight up against Chris, and if he goes up against Rick Devens, he for sure loses. Everyone has said that, but like if he could somehow just finagle that end game differently, and it would have been like Lauren in the end game with them, he would have won the season, I think. Chase, basically, if you sub out Fabio for Holly, I think Chase has like I would say a 2/3 chance of winning probably. Him and Holly were kind of like a dynamic duo as far as strategy, where a lot of people might have voted for her, but I think based on him losing 4-5, he had a lot of pull on the jury, and he probably would have won that game. I think he probably would have gotten Fabio's vote, so that would have made him the winner 5-4 at worst. Then in the God tier, Fishback. This tier is basically if they face anybody else in Final Tribal, I think that they win. Fishback, people know if he doesn't face JT and faces Aaron or anybody else, he wins that season. Um, Same thing with Parvati. I think if you sub out like Sandra for Jerry, I think Parvati wins that season. People might give it to Jerry, but I really don't think so. Jerry didn't do much that season at all, and Parvati saved her, but at the one vote. So I think Parvati really ran that season, I think, but she just people just didn't like her because she had teamed up with Russell. Mike White played a really good game, but didn't have a very good final tribal, and basically, I think he actually could have won that season if he just would have tried harder at final tribal. But based on the effort level he gave there, he didn't win. But if anybody but Nick is in the final three, Mike pretty easily wins. Aubrey, probably the most controversial win ever could be, well, one of them is probably Michelle's, and a lot of people think Aubrey was robbed. Again, I think if you sub in whoever else for Michelle, Aubrey wins that season. Brad Culpepper, you sub in Ty for Sarah, he automatically wins. I think he wins that season against anybody but Sarah. Same with, I think Chrissy wins her season if Ben doesn't make final. Um, Same down the line. Ozzy, Colby, Coach, Boston Rob, and Dominic. If you remove Yule, Tina, Sophie, um, Amber, and Wendell, I think all those people win their seasons. Ozzy definitely wins versus like Sundra and Becky. Colby definitely wins versus Keith. Coach, I think, has a really good shot if it's like him and Albert and let's say Brandon Hance in the final three. I'd say Coach wins very easily. The only thing about Coach is that if Ozzy makes the final, then he doesn't win. But I don't know. I still think that that was just Coach's season, and he had if he actually, from what I've heard too, people have said if Coach literally at Final Tribal, this is what jury members have apparently. This is some scuttlebutt they said. If Coach would have just owned his game and said, you know what, I used religion as a means of getting people on my side. I used the idea of like group prayer to coax to like lull people's guard down and like let me in and like become their ally. I was able to pull one over on Cochran. I fooled you all. Kind of if he would have owned his role as a villain in that season, people would have voted for him, but because he wanted to act really righteous for the final tribal, people resented that and so they didn't vote for him. Boston Rob, I think if he goes against Jenna, he definitely could have won. And again, a thing where I think Boston Rob actually probably really easily wins that season if his final tribal goes differently because he basically gave up at Final Tribal, and like to some questions he literally was like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what you want me to say, and then like proceeds to not answer their question. And I think if he would have just said some things more along the lines of, if he would have owned his game more, like he seemed to be saying sorry a lot and like apologizing and feeling really bad. But if you're gonna play a villain throughout the season, you gotta be a straightforward villain at Final Tribal too. You gotta say, hey, I played the way I did because I wanted to win. And Lex, a big proponent of him losing was Lex saying that you're a dude who you basically used our friendship to win the game, and he should have just called out Lex um as a hypocrite, because Lex said a lot of similar things earlier on in the season, because Lex was all like, hey Ethan, hey Colby, you're my friends, but I'm going to vote you out because this is business. If Rob would have said the exact same thing, I think he would have come off way better, but he just botched Final Tribal. And Dominic, best runner up ever, because literally he was one vote away from winning, and he was basically as close as you can get to winning Survivor without winning it. So I have him here at number 1. There's my rankings of all the runners up ever. If you guys agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. Check out some other Survivor videos, and I will see you all next time. Bye.